Soulstice is a new hack and slash indie game made in Unreal Engine 4, similar to Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. Now this one definitely draws heavily from my favorite manga series of all time, Berserk, and as you can see here, I've got a little Berserk collection set up for this video because I was actually really excited for this game. Definitely just looking at the game visually, there are aspects of it like the main character, their great sword, and their sister that seem very tied to Berserk. And there is even some ties to Claymore, I'd say, with the main character turning into a monster. She's a chimera, and in Claymore, the character is a Yoma hybrid, and both of them can kind of go berserk and become very powerful. Let's dive into this game on the Steam Deck and see how the performance is here. Unfortunately, it's not the greatest just off the bat, but we'll do a little bit more investigation. Starting off, I just went ahead and set the game to use Proton 7 in the compatibility settings, and initially the game just loaded the high settings preset, so I just stuck with it to see what the performance would be like. Now luckily there didn't seem to be any issues using Proton 7, so I don't think you're gonna have to install Proton GE and use that. For my performance testing, I played through the entire first level of the game, and the performance can definitely vary heavily area to area in the game. Definitely the most demanding area of the game were the cutscenes, where things slow down to a bit of a crawl on high settings, and when changing things down to low settings, the frame rates did improve in those cutscenes, but they were still not the best. This game does have quite a few large vistas that are in the background while you're fighting or roaming around, and these are beautiful to look at, but they are demanding on the performance. When running around using high settings here, it was extremely demanding on the Steam Deck, and I was not getting much above 30 FPS and frequently falling below 30 FPS. As I mentioned earlier, this game's built on Unreal Engine 4, and if you are familiar with UE4, you might know that shader caching can be a problem with it, and that is currently present here in this game. It does not have the shaders pre-cached on the Steam Deck yet, as this game currently does not have a status for the Steam Deck on the Steam store, but I'm sure in a few days they will have a status update, and hopefully the shaders can pre-cache at that point. This frequently happens for new releases, unless the developers go out of their way to get the game pre-approved before launch on the Steam Deck. Now here's some gameplay of one of the most intensive areas I found while falling through the sky, very similar to the opening in Bayonetta 2, and it's very intensive on the Steam Deck here, well into the 20s. Here is also some gameplay footage of running around the opening area and doing some combat there as well. I want to give you an idea of generally what the performance is like in these areas. The very beginning of the game seemed to be the most performance intensive part. Slightly later on, things did even out, and I did see around 40 to even 60 FPS in certain situations, but that was in smaller environments such as indoor settings or when I was up against a wall where there wasn't a ton of geometry going on in the background. This game does look beautiful, but it is quite demanding. Now to win back performance, you would normally drop the resolution in this game or use an upscaler like FSR on the Steam Deck. Now unfortunately, on the in-game settings menu, there aren't a ton of resolution options when you're running at full screen. Having more resolution options would be nice, so we can drop the resolution to maybe 960 by 540 and then turn on FSR in the Steam Deck settings. But even beyond that, what would be nicer is having access to FSR or other upscaling settings. Here in the graphics options, Unreal Engine 4 does have TAAU, which is a temporal anti-aliasing upscaling solution, and that's not even here at all. So hopefully in an update, developers can add FSR or upscaling from UE4 into here, because dropping the resolution for this game would definitely help the performance more than anything else. That being said, what options do we have to win back performance? Well, the obvious ones would be dropping the graphical settings. And I did drop the graphical settings to medium and test things out here, and I was confused because performance didn't change at all and neither did the visuals. So then I dropped it down to low as well, and still once again, I did not get a graphical change or a change to the frame rate or performance. I was pretty confused about what was going on here, and I thought the game still looked great at low settings, so I exited out of the game and switched to Proton Experimental, and when I fired the game back up, the game had loaded the low settings. So it looks like you might have to close the game down currently and then load it back up to actually have the graphical changes take effect in the game, which is definitely a con and not something that I see with a ton of games with graphical settings like this that you need to change. Sometimes if you're changing the API or something like that, that is understandable why they require a restart, but for these settings, it doesn't really make sense why you would have to restart the game here. As far as settings go, I was using all those settings now with texture set to high because our RAM usage wasn't high enough where it was a problem. You might be able to turn these up to very high, but you'll have to see what RAM usage you're getting. Once the game actually did load into the low settings, once I closed and restarted the game, it did give us some performance back, and we were having around 30 FPS much more frequently, and even in some scenarios, we were getting into the 60 FPS range. Now that wasn't very often, and it's in certain situations where you have a wall in the background occluding all the geometry that would be taking a rendering toll. Some of the scenes that were pretty intensive on the GPU seem to be the ones that had vistas in the background with a lot of fog in them. I don't know if this is volumetric fog, but it would make sense for the performance we see here. Also, when you're in combat, performance does tend to drop a bit versus just running around, and obviously effects are popping off while that's going on. While the performance here at low is definitely improved, I don't think this is the greatest performance still, and I don't find it to be a very experienced play on a handheld format. Locking this one down to 30 or 40 FPS will still see the frame rate dropping below the target frequently, and with the shader compilation, there will be frame time spikes pretty frequently on your first playthrough of the game. As excited as I am for this game, I would hold off on buying this one on the Steam Deck for the moment and playing it here. I would wait a couple days to see if the game gets verified on the Steam Deck, so shaders are pre-cached, and you can just download them right away to avoid shader caching. And then hopefully the developers add some upscaling options to the game, so that way you can get far superior performance in this title. That about wraps this one up though, guys. This game is pretty cool, and I definitely intend to play it more on my desktop computer where I have a much more powerful setup, but it would be great to have this one working better on the Steam Deck so you could take it on the go. If you want more content, check out my channel. I have a ton of Steam Deck content over there, and another game that's coming out pretty soon is the Geofield Chronicle. That one had a demo drop, and I actually did a performance overview of that one on the Steam Deck already, so maybe check that one out too. Other than that, have a good one, everybody.